an old student and a new student calling in. Dhammadas, where are you?
In Chicago, in USA.
Yes, I have been there.
Oh,
John
nice.
in Austin, and I've been there.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Where are you from originally? Dhammarato?
I don't remember. I don't know. How
Oh,
original do you want?
town you grew up in, or
I grew up in 8 different towns.
oh, okay. Was your father in the military?
No, and that made it all the worse. You know, he was a natural gas plumber,
Oh, okay. Cool.
and he installed natural gas systems into one town after another after another.
Oh, nice.
Not so nice, no. That was across the state of South Carolina mostly.
It's hard to move around so much when you're so young, I would imagine.
Um, it's hard without using superlatives to describe the racism that I was introduced to when I was a child.
Wow.
But it did have the advantage uh, of being able to see societies more objectively because I was always the new kid on the block. We would move about once every year or year and a half.
This is just kombucha, by the way. I don't drink, so just making that clear.
I don't know what that is.
It's like a fermented kind of grape juice, or they make it with black tea, and uh, you could put any kind of fruit juice in it, really, but it's non-alcoholic or anything. It's just they sell it everywhere. I'm from anyway.
Um, so that's the kind of the answer then is that yeah I've been all over the place.
Nice.
So when when it when it came time to graduate from high school, I had already joined the Naval Reserve. So I went to college, and then in the middle of college, I decided to go and do my Navy duty. Being in the reserve was only 2 years, and then back to college, and then change of everything, including subject. And actually, no, after I got out of the Navy, I actually worked for IBM Corporation. And I worked for them for about 3 and something years. Then I went back to college.
Yeah, I learned that from your previous videos. You're into programming or something like that. Computer programming, or
Uh, yeah, I can talk code with coders because I've done some coding
oh, cool, nice.
and design, straddling both hardware and software. So that winds up with a degree, a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering.
Nice.
After a graduate degree in math and a double major in science.
That's cool.
When did you move to Thailand?
When did I first show up in Thailand?
Yeah.
It would be 1982, I believe.
Was that were you there for what were you there for?
Dasa.
Ah, okay. Yep.
Nice. He is so awesome. I love him. I've only read 3 of his books, but he is amazing.
Well, if you keep calling back, we'll give you some new ones to look at.
Sure.
There's a lot of his stuff that's available, both on the internet and also privately. And we have several people who are, let us say, spending a fair amount of time translating more and more of the stuff out of Thai language into English.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that it's a fixed amount, they can prioritize what needs to be done first or next. And the other side of that is that no, it's not yet fixed because the Thai community is still collecting stuff from all over the place, and all the way down to going to places where he sent letters to and trying to get a hold of the letters that he sent.
Wow.
There is a very, very large compound in Bangkok. In fact, it's just north of the very downtown area. It's connected to and close to one of the largest, most well-known parks in Bangkok called Chatuchak. And that this property is so large that it's got a lake on the property. And then the meditators will sit around on the outside of the lake.
That's awesome.
A huge piece of property. We're getting Google Map out and look for. They do have the name associated with Wat Suan Mok, I think, on the Google Map. And that the name of the organization is Buddha Dasa Itapanyo Archive. So it's the BIA is the website. And it is immense, but it's almost all in Thai. But they also have a huge amount in Chinese.
Nice.
Because Bhikkhu Buddhadasa had a lot of connection with Chinese.
I like how open he was to all ideas, all religions, as far as they didn't, as long as they didn't hurt anybody. I love how open he was, how he would carry around a Bible, they say, just to for his own knowledge, to gain more knowledge about different cultures or religions. I think that's because you don't see much of that these days. Usually it's either one person's way or the highway. And he would tell Christians, they said, to just go study your Jesus. He was on the right path,
I actually had several conversations with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa about Jesus.
Wow, that's awesome.
The basic outcome, it seems that if you read the red letter version, which is, the red letter edition of the Bible is where everything that Jesus said is highlighted in red letters. If you stay with just the red letters and take out everything else, read just that, you can see enormous wisdom, enormous amounts of Dhamma in there.
Oh yeah.
But that it is geared for the people of the time. And because it does, you can also see a lot of magical thinking. They raised him to the level of Son of God without understanding what that term means. You can call somebody a son of a gun, or son of something.
Then there's cultural influences as well as the variable of time, how much time has passed, and things get lost in time,
Right. Well, you see, the same thing kind of happened with the Buddha in the sense that he had an audience, and much of the audience were lay Brahmins. This was a Brahmin area up in the Bihar area around Varanasi, kind of west of and northwest of Calcutta, that area, up into Nepal. In fact, Kenya is actually in Nepal, where the Shakyan clan were. But when he was out recruiting big time. What he would do he would go to the head of an organization and had conversations with them and convert them into his way of looking. And then they would bring the whole group with them. One was the master of a fire temple. And he also did this. There's several stories about Brahmins. One Brahmin, old Brahmin master, spent 6 of his Brahmin students to the Buddha, one after another, and he converted each one of them in turn. And then after the conversion, they'd come back to their old teacher to explain what happened, which would be the right thing to do. So this is one of the stories. But basically, the way that he taught would be the model that we would refer to in neuro-linguistic programming as pacing and leading, or getting inside of the model so that you can teach. Just like we were talking about Jesus, that Jesus was inside the Jewish model of his day, but he was teaching noble things.
Yeah.
He used the word Abba, which is always mistranslated as the word Father. But if you just look at the word and see what it means, I mean, we've been using that word. It's deeply part of our language. And it also has the derivative of above and about, out and about. So those things that are about you, the things that are above you, is the Abba, which is what he referred to as that's been translated as the Father. Well, no, he was pointing at the big it. He was pointing at the surround that we're in, and that he would say things like, Abba and I are one, which means that now he is part of the whole, part of the universe. And things like Abba is within you, and you are within Abba. Or Abba and I are of one mind.
Right.
Okay, so these are the kinds of things that he would say. Another one which is really pointing, the Greek word is basilica theos. Basilica. You heard that word, doesn't need to be translated. And it certainly is poorly translated when we translate it as kingdom. So what we're talking about is a huge, expensive cathedral. The basilica is the bigger of the cathedrals. You could also think of it as kind of a palace, but the basilica in Rome is not just the cathedral itself or the basilica, but it's also the residence of many of the higher cardinals and people who work there. Okay, so now that you're understanding what we're talking about, basilica, what we're talking about is a huge, expansive home. And so in Luke, then, Jesus says, the basilica theos is within you. The kingdom of God, or the actual home, your home resides within you.
Absolutely. That's actually the title of I don't know if you're familiar with you're probably familiar with Leo Tolstoy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his latter works, because he renounced all the books that he was famous for, because he was an atheist for most of his life. And when he became a Christian, he wrote his first book about his transformation called A Confession and Other Religious Writings. And then he went on to create more called What I Believe and The Kingdom of Heaven is Within You. And he made his own version of Christianity. They actually labeled it Tolstoyan Christianity, where he takes out all the kind of metaphysical, miraculous stuff from the Bible and only concentrates on what pretty much the red letters were, particularly the Sermon on the Mount, because he believed that's when Jesus had the opportunity to speak to everybody, thousands of people. So if ever there was a passage in the Bible where you can learn the true meaning of Jesus' teachings, was when he was talking to the masses, because he might never see them again. So he concentrated on that, and basically the message is a message of peace, unity, love. He even says in certain passages, even to be angry with your brother is to be thrown into hell. And that reminds me of Theravada Buddhism.
Well, that was one of Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa's favorites.
Yeah.
Because it's literally true, and it works exactly along with the woeful state that they have in the Hinduism, or let us say Brahmanism, that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa then picked up, or not Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, the Buddha himself picked up these woeful states, that you can be reborn in hell. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa points out that's exactly anger, animosity, and agitation or anxiety is the hell realm. And so Jesus knew that exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, exactly, okay. So getting into that area, how is it that Jesus knew so much Dhamma? Was he introduced to it from the outside? Because we know of various places. For instance, we know that Buddha sent monks in his lifetime, as well as Ashoka did it big time, establishing the Therapute in Alexandria, as well as that was also the time of Alexander the Great. They say that that Alexander the Great, in fact, was so spent when he got to India that that it was Ashoka who was able to rebel him. He was big enough at that time. So we're talking about that period of history. And by the way, that's exactly when Buddhism started using statuary, with all of the really old ones that you have around that area of around Bodh Gaya and Isitanya and all the statuary that's there. Doesn't
What is
come
that?
from Buddha, it comes from the 3rd century BC.
What's statuary?
Rupa, Buddha Rupas.
But what does the word stats? Oh, is it just statues?
Statues, right.
Oh,
Instead
okay,
of David, it's statues of the Buddha. Sitting,
right.
standing, walking, lying down, all for the posture. All of that got started because of Greek influence. So if the Greeks were having influence on Asia, and India must have been having some influence on that area of Europe,
Absolutely.
at least centuries before Jesus came along. And there's also the issue of the scenes, because when you look at, or the Essenes, depending upon how you say it, that group is surprisingly looking more like Buddhist compound, a Buddhist monastery, than it does anything that would be seen in anywhere else in that whole area.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I don't know how familiar both of you are with Advaita Vedanta from the Hinduism beliefs, but I'm pretty familiar with it. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm okay with it. But I mean, there's so much correlation between Advaita Vedanta, non-dualism, Hindu philosophy, whatever you want to call it, so to speak, and the message that Buddha Dasa Bhikkhu was preaching. There's so much correlation, and the only difference that people can't seem to get around is, like, some call it in Advaita Vedanta the true self, but Buddha Dasa Bhikkhu might have referred to it as, take your pick, voidness, emptiness, nibbana, what have you. But it's just subtle differences. But I never cared about the subtle differences. I always tried to see what actually went together, and the wisdom is the same. I don't care what you call it. You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
are you familiar with Advaita Vedanta? And what do you think about that?
Probably not as much as you are, but enough to know, and having conversations with other students and whatnot, that the way that I describe it is something like this. Whenever a teacher, or even in the sense of here on Skype, that an experience needs to be conveyed, or let us say a skill needs to be passed on, whether that skill is carpentry or the Dhamma, or many of the skills that are needed within the practice of the Dhamma. In fact, that's what the Dhamma really is all about in the beginning of the practice, is the development of a set of skills. And so, thus, one trains oneself. That's what the whole quality of the word practice is all about, too. All right. But to try to take that skill and pass it on, it has to come through several different layers first. Because you cannot give someone a direct experience, though we often try to do it. But even when we do, what we're doing is we're taking a word that describes a feeling. And because it was a big feeling, then we have to make the word even bigger by aggrandizing it using low class language or whatever, so that I can get a word that's big enough and loud enough to convey the way that I feel.
Yeah.
All right. This is grandiosity in psychological terms, that we become grandiose.
Yeah, Tolstoy said the truth was simple and that lies were filled with many words and pretension. I'm like,
And also many places to go. An easy example of that is, how old are you?
35.
Okay, now how old are you? Answer the question, but lie to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not easy to get
No,
that
no,
lie going.
no. What I'm getting at is you can say 34, you can say 39, you can say 46, you can say 98, you can say 371. You can say I'm the age of Methuselah, 600 or 900 or whatever like that. You can say any lie.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting at is the lies are vast, but the truth is very small.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And in fact, the teachings of the Buddha, when you take it apart the way that it normally is transmitted, looks like a vast amount of stuff. Where in fact, no, what it is that the way that I think of it is I'm going to dump a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle on you, a few pieces at a time, and let you start to put them together until you get the full mosaic. And even still, then there's going to be a couple of pieces missing, just like the junkyard dog song. With a couple of pieces gone, because there will always be holes in our knowledge. We don't know everything. It's just not. In fact, part of gaining real wisdom is to recognize how little we actually know and how vast, really, really vast, going back to the term Abba that we were talking about before. That which is up and about me is completely so much bigger than I am that it dwarfs me. I don't go to Bangkok often, but whenever I go to Bangkok, I get that feeling that I am a nothing in a vast sea of humanity.
And you have to realize that if it's like alcoholics, if they don't admit that they're alcoholics, they can't start to cure themselves, so to speak. If you don't admit what you are, that you don't know certain things, or that you are just a wretch, good luck fixing it if you're never going to acknowledge it.
Right, exactly. So, getting back to that point that we were in the process of making, that is, if I'm going to teach you or give you a skill, I cannot do it directly. We don't have that kind of connection. Even if you were sitting here on the porch, I'm not going to go touch your forehead and go, and anything happen. That's not the way that it's done. Here's how it is done. That I take it and take experience and the knowledge, or any teacher will do this, and then put it into a set of different concepts that seem to fit. I then speak the concept. You hear the concept, and now you have to decode that concept into an experience. And so, knowing that, part of what we do then is that we will use more than one concept. We'll actually go out looking for new ways of saying the same old thing over and over again with different metaphors here and different ones that. Okay? So now that we know that, first off, that there is only one truth. The truth is small. And the other one, which is well known and accepted universally, is that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. But then the third line they don't know so much about, and that is, you shall know the truth shall set you free. But first, it's going to piss you off. Why is that? Because that means that now we're beginning to cut through my own delusions, hallucinations, magical thinking to come down to the truth. And if the truth is small and my beliefs and delusions are vast, that means I've got to unload a lot of junk. And some of that stuff, some of our beliefs are prized possessions. So, in that regard, we need more than one conceptual way to look at it. Because, in fact, you could use it in the sense of the associative law of multiplication. A times B plus A times C is equal to A times B plus C. Do you see what I mean? I can extract that A out. I can put it in, and now it's AB and AC, but I can pull it out, and I can have AB and then add the A back in. What we're talking about is the A is common. And so in these concepts, we can find the common thread. That's most likely the part that's actually the most true.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
And so by using various concepts, we can then start looking at it from different directions and thereby be able to pull what the actual meaning is out of it. But in the beginning, that system that people believe is a magical belief system. And so we introduce concepts within that magical belief system. A clear example of that, in fact, not only is there example after example of it, but that is stated directly that they start with teaching the Brahmins who believe in magic into using that magic to clean up their act. So in that regard, Sila comes first. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. You probably heard those three words together. Sila, Samadhi, Panya.
If I did, I don't remember.
Okay. Starting with Sila. In other words, you teach the child to behave himself and clean up his act. And then you teach him to read. That's the study part, or the samadhi. And then he gains wisdom, Panya. And at that time of Panya, if he's gotten wisdom, he no longer needs the stories or the concepts about the Sila, because he can see his behavior and its effect directly because of wisdom. But it's hard to teach a child wisdom, so we teach them a set of rules first with the concepts. All right? All religions do this. All religions start with, in fact, Christians are really, really big on sin. Okay? But it's the same belief system that the Hindus had. It's the same belief system in the sense of your behavior in the current position you're in will determine your existence in the future, and that your current position is dependent upon your past behaviors in the past. And they say that in the sense of the law of karma is that good action gives good results and bad action gives bad results. And now, just to make sure that the kids really understand it, and that will always be the case. Even if the karma machine has to dig you up out of the ground just to kick your ass, you're going to get caught for what you do wrong.
I always so clearly understood it in my mind that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I always clearly understood it like the old Zen phrase, like, we're born and we die every second, but we just aren't aware of it. Like, I always looked at karma as like, if you're not being mindful if you're not in the moment, if you're attaching yourself to the I, good luck with the next moment, because it's going to be the same thing unless you change it. That was always,
You're speaking
because
from a
why
position.
else would Buddha be different than Hinduism?
Pardon?
Oh.
I would go so far as to say, and
I'm sorry, I think it froze a little.
How is it now?
Good for me.
Okay. I think he's frozen.
Oh yeah.
All right. So,
Connection.
oh, you're back. Okay. No. Oh,
Might
are you
have
back?
to call back. Let's see.
Going to call back, I think.
Cool.
So he kind of took over. Do you have any questions? If he calls back, we'll let him back in. Getting started.
Yeah, no, nothing in particular comes to mind. Hearing about the natural method, that's really helpful. Kind of knowing that it's not a one size fits all, and you kind of tweak it based upon the student's situation, progress, and needs.
Well, that's actually the problem with every book.
Yeah.
Every book has the problem of being organized.
Right.
And another kind of problem with the book is that the book itself cannot say somewhere on page like 96, hey, dude, you're not paying attention to what I said on page 6. Go back and read what I said before, all right? But a real teacher listens to what the students are saying,
right,
so that we can keep going back. And another way of looking at it is that it's actually just one thing that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that needs to be done over and over and over and over again. But like concepts, it's described differently. The beginning student will describe it one way, and then the advanced student will describe the same issue in a completely different way. And always the solution is the same in regards to Goenka, never mind, start again. Or what Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa was so fond of telling me, look at what you're doing, which is nothing but sati, which is another word for, in English language, wakey, wakey. Wake up!
Yeah.
And that word is translated as mindfulness.
Right. Yeah.
That's one of the problems, in fact, with the Buddha Dhamma nowadays is that the language translations are not very good. Just like Jesus's translations were translated by people who really didn't quite understand what Jesus was saying. We need a Buddhist to do the translations out of Aramaic into English.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
Yeah.
But the Dhamma is the same, just like the Vedanas. And by the way, I think it was the Vedanas that Buddha did study when he was young, because he knew, in fact, he had to have known in order to have gained the faith of those people. He really knew their stuff and would then use that in context to teach them sila, to teach them behavior. There's several sutras. One of them is about puja at death. All of the rituals around what happens at death. And Buddha turned it around because the question was not what will be the value of all of the puja that's done for this dead corpse that I just came from? But what about all the puja that's done for my own funeral?
Hmm.
And the Buddha pointed out to him, oh, the puja that you need to do to take care of your own funeral is day by day. It's not a bunch of expensive ceremony done by a bunch of people who are lying to you. You get up and chant and pray and do let us say, a body roast
Hmm.
in a certain procedure.
Hmm.
That's the point about the sila, is how one lives day by day. And so that was the beginning place where the Buddha was teaching that in order to help them slowly come out of their magical thinking, so that they could come out of the magical thinking and see the way things really are. And that was basically what Jesus was doing. But Jesus did not have many of the things that the Buddha had going for him. For one thing, Jesus was dirt poor. And the Buddha left a very, very wealthy household. He moved into other areas, but he did go back to the Sakyans from time to time. But many of the Sakyans had become monks, and he lived actually around and in the areas of King Pasenadi and Bimbisara. Bimbisara then was the great, great, great grandfather of Asok. Okay, so he knew these guys. He was around royalty. He didn't have any problems with that. And in fact, the competition came from the priesthood, not from the royalty or the rulers. And he was on the inside with them. Here's an example of that. The difference between Jesus and the Buddha would be that when Jesus went into the temple and saw what a wreck and what a mess it was, he cleaned the place out himself. Buddha would not have done that. He would have gone to the head dude at that temple and explained the situation to him and got him to agree to get the money changers out of the temple. That was just a difference in style. Took him a whole lot longer to nail the Buddha than it did for them to nail Jesus. So that's another point, is that the Buddha taught for about 45 years. And he was really excellent. He was really, really well trained.
Have you ever heard that theory that Jesus traveled to India and met with Buddhists and learned from them?
Yes, there's also the story that actually has an actual burial place.
Yeah.
They say is the burial place of Jesus, that he went back.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the possibility that when he was in Egypt, that he stayed a lot longer than they thought he did, and that he was there with the group that was called the Theraputra, which is actually another way of saying Theravada. It just Vada is different word than put. When you say put, or put, that's a way of speaking, and Vada is the voice of, or the teachings of the elders. So Theravada or Theraputra, that gives us actually the modern English word of therapy. Comes from this word Theraputra, which was a very Buddhist-like group of healers that were in Alexandria at that time. So he could have been with them. So we don't know what Jesus said. In fact, that was part of the discussion with Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa, that I took it this way, that what Jesus taught was so close to the Buddha that it had to be something where he was trained. And Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa's position was, oh no, the truth and wisdom are available everywhere. Even the Buddha said that it was something, an old path.
Yeah, almost. Sorry, I was talking to my wife.
Okay. That it was an old path that he just merely rediscovered.
Yeah, that makes sense, because, I mean, the truth would be simple and available to anybody. Maybe the few words might be different, but it's the truth, because we all, and it's like in our DNA. When you hear it, you might not be able to conjure it up yourself, but when you hear it, pure truth, I think anybody from any religion, as long as they're biologically sound, cognitively speaking, could understand it, or even feel it. Maybe even if you're not cognitively there 100%, I still think you can feel it. There's like something inside of us that just recognizes it.
Actually, you're getting right at the point. What we're actually trying to do is create an experience so that the students can actually be there, to actually get it, to actually have the experience directly. But it's always taught in a set of concepts. And then in those concepts in a book are by necessity, they have to be organized to where individual sessions with students can be around what the students want to talk about, want to hear. And I like these kind of introductions where students kind of guide where we're going with it. But it is also a good idea to at least get within the framework of what we're doing, that we're actually developing skills, and those skills that are being developed are the ones that are well known because they're on the Eightfold Noble Path. That right noble view is a skill to be developed, but it takes a while. But the one that we need the most in the immediate moment, and the one to be practiced over and over again, is the skill of sati. And that the skill of sati can also be referenced or understood to be step 9 of anapanasati. And step 9 is to experience the mind, which is to wake up.
So sorry to interrupt, but I must be going now because it's kind of late here. But so nice meeting both of you. You're awesome. Have a wonderful rest of your convo. I hope we could chat again sometime. Thank you for taking the time to talk.
Not sometime. Let's make an appointment. When are you going to call back?
Maybe tomorrow night around the same time.
That would be good. I'll see you.
Okay, cool. Bye, guys.
See ya. Yeah.
Okay, so this would be then a good segue to go right into the beginning part of the practice. That sati is the first skill that is to be developed.
Yeah.
All right, and this is exactly why people will then go and sit on the floor, perhaps on a cushion, in a particular sitting posture, because you see, the whole way of the concept is that we see what people are doing, and monkey see, monkey do.
Right.
And we really need to be educated as to the skills that we need to develop.
Yeah.
And that first skill is sati. By far, the most important skill of all is sati, because if you don't remember to wake up, then none of the other skills are going to get a chance of being practiced.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Let us say that you have a piano in the basement to practice, and you've got to practice it because you've got a recital coming.
Yeah.
But there's no way you're going to go climb down the stairs unless you remember, I've got to go practice the piano.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What about, yeah. So, right. That makes sense. Sati, mindfulness. If you're not aware, nothing else matters. Okay. This is so this is really my first time having a in-depth Dhamma conversation out loud, so you'll have to bear with me here a little bit. But you develop right view, right mindfulness, right effort, and all these skills, and then the goal is you can see things as they actually are, and then you wake up. You're awake to how reality is
at that particular moment.
At that moment. Okay.
At that moment.
Okay.
That's one of the major concepts that students have to change, is their concept about past and future, or that events determine who you are.
Hmm.
In the sense of, I had this event, I had this particular meditation session, and this, that, and the other thing happened on this day at this place at this time, and that makes me a whatchamacallit.
Ah.
Okay. That's not the way that it happens at all.
Hmm.
Okay. Everything is processed. Everything is processed. And so that whatchamacallit may in fact exist, but it would be in existence in the sense of the realization of, it's been about 5 years since I've been angry. I remember the last time, and since that time, any time that anger came up, it didn't get to the surface.
Hmm.
Okay. So now we're looking at it in the right direction.
Hmm.
Because if people say, oh, well, I had this experience and that makes me a whatchamacallit, then that whatchamacallit then is not going to determine the new behavior.
Yeah.
That the new behavior then, as the change has happened, then will determine. That's about the same way as I was about to say about karma. Is that first off, what is a good action and what is a bad action? Because we try to tell kids, well, doing what I tell you to do is a good action, and rebelling against me, that's a bad action. And so that's how we begin to look at it, as rebelling against authority and whatnot. But if you look at it from this following thing, normally a good action is determined by the knowledge of the outcome. For instance, if you buy stock in the stock market or at a particular stock and that stock goes up, then was that a good action, buying that stock?
Sure.
How about if the stock goes down? Now, was that a bad action?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily.
Well, what we're saying here is that the outcome of the action determines the value of the action, not the action itself.
Right. Right.
And that also includes a whole lot of collateral damage or unintended consequences.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also the point that a lot of that we don't even know. We're not ever going to know all of the extenuating circumstances. Just can't know it. It just keeps going. Things are very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. In that regard, we can at least go so far as to say that many actions are mixed. They have some good aspects and some bad aspects, and the outcomes are going to be some mixture in and out. Well, that point alone, that third kind of karma that the Buddha talks about, actually destroys that first kind of karma. And the second kind of karma, good action gives good results, and the second is bad action gives bad results. That kind of destroys that kind of idea. And instead, what we begin to see is that some actions are seen to be good because if you do that, in every case, there will be benefit. An example of that, a bad action, would be if you slip and fall, you will get hurt. The result, okay? So better not slip and fall. So that would be an example of an actual cause and an effect. That's what real karma is. Action has an equal and opposite reaction, and it comes about pretty quick. Okay, the clear favorite example in America is that somebody's holding a big gun, and they pull the trigger, and the bullet goes out the barrel this way, and then there is a recoil that hits the shoulder. All right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that hitting of the shoulder, does the recoil of that gun happen 5 minutes after the bullet is shot?
No.
How about 300 years later?
No.
How about the next life of the guy that he's standing there, a newborn babe, and then he grows up, and then bang, and he gets hit in the shoulder because he shot a gun in a previous life? Is that going to happen?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Okay. How about does the butt of the gun hit his shoulder in the reaction before he pulls the trigger?
No.
No. Okay. How about does it happen at exactly the same time that he pulls the trigger?
No.
How about an instant later?
Yes.
Long enough for an action to have a reaction.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what the law of karma is really all about, and the Buddha is fairly clear about that in the Lion's Roar. In one of it, he says that he knows action and the cause of action as it is brought about by cause and effect. That is affected by the whole concept of cause and effect. That we can see within. You've seen these domino things that you push one domino and hits another, and finally it spreads out and it goes to a very fancy kind of thing, right? Each domino that had was affected by the domino before it, and then it becomes the cause for the next domino to have an effect. Okay, so everything in the universe is kind of like that, so that we're in a constant, huge flux of cause and effect.
Yeah.
Always happening. Okay, this is what then the Buddha is talking about in the Dhammakai, and this is what Jesus was talking about in the word Abba. That which is about us is teeming with life. It is in constant flux. Everything is just always churning, boiling, bubbling at a rate that's so fast that our fastest camera can't catch it. That's anicca.
And impermanence.
Everything is impermanent. Really, really impermanent. Things are going really, really a lot.
So how this tennis ball? So how is this impermanent? Because it'll fall apart.
Yes, it will, according to your eyes, eventually. It will change color. In fact, you can put it in the windowsill and watch it change color over the course of a day or two. Because you can then change the side and you say, wait a minute, the side that faces the sun has now has had a bleached out color, and the part of the ball that was not facing towards the sun. Okay. So that kind of change you can see. And some people would go so far as to say, oh, the tennis ball has been ruined because it's weirdly colored right now. And therefore it's of no longer of value. All right. So we do know that things are happening at a microscopic level, so that eventually you will come to see the damage that was done, but that the damage was being done all along. It was only your incapacity to see the damage being done that you let that continue to happen. That if you could see the damage being done much quicker, then you'll have an opportunity to do something about it. Okay. Now we take that away from the tennis ball and we put it into our whole lives are like that. But in fact, I've just described the second noble truth. That all of the suffering that is occurring is because of our actions that are ignorant. And that if we can see the effects that we cause, and this is basically wisdom, is seeing the projection or the trajectory of where things are headed. And so this is why we want to do that waking up process, is so that we can be in that state to see what's going on, rather than in the way that we normally live our lives, is just simply not paying attention to stuff.
That makes sense.
Okay. So the more attention, go ahead.
I need to run here. I gotta head out in a little bit. I would love to schedule a follow-up as well.
Okay.
What about not so the Dhamma is going to be tomorrow night at the same time. Could I do Saturday night at the same time?
You can call whenever you like. What's
Okay.
today? I don't know what today is, so we'll have to figure out what Saturday is.
So it's
Today is a Friday here.
Yeah, it's Friday your time, I bet. Friday morning, yeah. And Thursday night my time.
Okay.
Yeah.
The night is long,
Yeah. Yeah.
so if you call tomorrow, you may or may not coincide with him.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll talk to you sometime soon.
I would really like that.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Dhammarato.
Okay, we'll see you.